Hey, what's up, everybody? It's James again with the subject supposed to speak. Uh, so I'm here winding down before work, or a day of work rather, tomorrow. So there's a interesting lapse, winding down before work. Definitely not about to go to work. So what kind of sense can we make of that? Winding down before work. Okay. So immediately my mind is associating the very topic that I tried to avoid last time. Um, I really don't want to talk about it. And I guess that's all the more reason for us to just get into it forthwith. Um, but you know what? I always want to give some backstory. So we're gonna go back to some of the previous backstory, in fact, and I'm gonna talk about the events that led up to me actually meeting the individual in question. Um, it's a person with whom I no longer have anything to do and likely will not and almost certainly shouldn't, unfortunately, just given the way things transpired. And, it's whatever sorts of consolations I want to give myself about it, oh, that's just the way life goes. People come into and out of your life. Um, there was this sort of momentousness to uh, what I can't help but perceive as my failure to just let this person in. That is something that still haunts me every single day. And mind you, it's been 6 months since I last communicated with her, um, and had her communicate back to me in any event. And yeah, so it's really trying. But let's go back to the circumstances under which I first met her. So this was almost no, I really was about 7 years ago. I was living here at my folks' place in Moore Park, and my older brother was just laying it on me thick with his bullshit, just harassing, persecuting me, talking shit to me, whatever. I'd ask my dad to tell him to stop it. I told him, look, how do you think this makes you feel? I'm going to pursue, this very demanding sequence of technical and scientific coursework, in this sort of emotionally unstable environment, right? I'm only 25. I'm not that old. There's no sense in me trying to be working full time and going to school full time. I have the opportunity to work part time, maybe 20, 30 hours a week, and to go to school. And actually, at that time, eventually I would end up working probably, yeah, at least a 40-hour work week, shortly thereafter when I moved out, and that's exactly what happened. My dad wouldn't capitulate. He wouldn't, defend me against my older brother. He wouldn't say, look, you need to stop harassing and persecuting James. And so I tearfully, made the choice to go, even though I knew I needed the support and the help, and there's no reason for me to be gone at that juncture. So I left, and I moved into this house in Somas with this very colorful cast of characters. Everyone had their reason for being there, and everyone's reason spoke to some kind of deficiency or failure, of some sort, if not on their parts, then some tragedy, some event in the course of their lives that the fallout of which none of them had really been able to recover robustly from, in terms of finding sort of stability and privacy. So everyone was there because the rent was cheap. It's a house up on a hill in Somas, just off the old 118. Beautiful ranch style, one story on a huge plot of land that had a lot of odd bits of bric-a-brac, sort of sporadically placed around it. It was a really neat time. It was a really neat place. You know, the family that owned it, uh, they or actually managed the property. They're, you know, these real estate moguls out here in Thousand Oaks, and you know they managed something around the neighborhood of like 300 different properties or something like that. It was like their family business. This is what I recall. You know, the sons of the management firm, you know, who were dealing with it. This is what I recall them saying, and you know, they were close with their parents, and you know, I think they all pretty much had their own places to live if they wanted them. You know, whether it was the annex at the house in Somas, or whether it was, you know, a studio on their own property, whatever it was, you know, uh, they seemed like they were fairly well off, and good bunch of dudes, young guys, very friendly. So I started renting this room at $600 a month, and all inclusive. Not a bad deal for that time. Um, the place was pretty much out in the boonies, and you know, my roommates were just fascinating people that I got to know very well. Um, the first one that comes to mind, her name was Simin, and she was this 60 some odd year old Iranian Belgian woman who had this very thick accent, and it was just so incredible the way that, you know, when I came there with my two jobs. I was working at the law firm, and on the one hand, and I was also, what was I doing? I was delivering food by night at a local Mexican restaurant in Newbury Park, and you know, both jobs I'd gotten from friendly connections. Yeah, it's clearing, you know, maybe 2,100, 2,200 bucks a month, which was very livable, you know. And I was in school almost full time. I was taking 8 units, so 3/4 time, and it may have been 7, but you know, having to part with my family on those terms was just, it was really, really painful for me. And, you know, it wasn't quite salutary. At least the end result wasn't. Um, the first month was all right. You know, I made rent and everything. I was watching my expenses. I came there very depressed. I was very sad, you know, that things had to go the way they had to go with my family for what felt like the millionth time, you know, in terms of my older brother's bullshit just, you know, tearing us apart. So I was there and I was quite depressed. And I remember, you know, Samin one day, some weeks into it, she just said, you know, you've changed since you've been here. And I said, how? And she said, well, you know, when you first got here, you were very sad, very depressed, and your face was down, and you know, you didn't talk too much, and now look at you, you're smiling, you're happy. And you know, something in me was so grateful for her having made that remark, because it made me realize, okay, wow, you know, I can do this thing on my own. You know, I don't need to depend on my parents. I can really, you know, get out there, do the damn thing. I can be in school, you know, part time. I can work full time, and I can make a life for myself. You know, this is pretty cool. You know, it had been a while since I'd been out on my own, and you know, I hadn't been able to sort of sustain it. I sustained things for a while, you know, in a couple different living situations, maybe a year at a time. But you know, I was just kind of scraping by, just working, you know, very meager part-time hours, paying rent. I wasn't really trying to accomplish much with my life, um, and you know, yeah, I made very little money, but I also spent very little. I'd done this for some years prior, but at this point, you know, I was motivated, and I wanted to get things done, and I wanted to get this sequence of courses done, and to get this license. And so I found myself at this house in Somas. My other roommate, the other most prominent one that comes to mind, is this 30 some odd year old dude, gray hairs. He was basically this kind of degenerate white trash alcoholic from Camarillo, and he had been dishonorably discharged from the Marine Corps for being caught with speed and prostitutes in the same night, I believe, was the story. And Is this something, my other buddy who's a 7-year recon Marine said, that's just one of those things that you don't ever really recover from. That sort of thing happens to you and it scars you for the rest of your life. That kind of shame that comes, over your head. And I saw the sense in that. And so this guy, Troy was his name, he he lived on maybe $900 in unemployment a month and did nothing with himself. Just lived, got high and drunk at night. Woke up the next morning fairly miserable. Uh, had a bowl of home cooked chili and maybe a bottle still was reserved to kill his hangover. And went about his business after that. And, so there's him. Another roommate, Tim. He lived in an RV on the property that I was originally planning on living in. And Tim was this portly linguistics grad student dropout who had been in the PhD program in linguistics at UCLA. He decided that everyone was fake and that he couldn't do it anymore. I think he used that as an excuse to fuck off and do lots of drugs. And so, by the time that kind of came to an end, he found himself in the RV at the house of Somas. And he was just, he had some interesting symptomatic features to his sort of whole his character. He just, I found at some point that he smoked methamphetamine, and it all made sense because he'd go on for hours and hours about being able to do Jedi tricks on people and levitation and just all this, being able to warm his hands and heal with his hands. He called it super normal, and I'm like, dude, you don't need to invent a new word for your superstitious beliefs in impossible phenomenon. Okay, like just call it what it is. It's a bunch of bullshit. Of course, he wouldn't concede to that, especially when he was high. So there's him, and who else was there? There was another roommate who shortly moved out, given how fucked up things got there quickly. He was living in the annex at the time, this, studio apartment attached to the home. And then there was also, finally, what was his name? Tom. He was an older Australian man. He was Jewish, and he was in his 80s or something. He was estranged from his wife and his children, his ex-wife, I believe. And he kind of lived up there, out of touch with his family. And there was one final individual who lived on the property. His name was Ross, and he lived in a small, tiny room that was attached to the garage. And apparently, he was a ward of the state. I don't know, like some kind of sex crime he'd committed or something along those lines. And he ended up, basically the people who owned that property were paid quite a handsome sum of money to keep him there, to house him there, because it was kind of off the grid, and I guess he had the right to work at that point, but it was kind of like almost a work furlough sort of situation. So all of that was the sort of backdrop to things. Beautiful, ranch style home, 1-story, hardwood interior. There was a lot that surrounded it, sort of dry, grassy lot. There was a lot of stuff, old, rusty farming equipment, abandoned cars, kind of almost like a Mad Max sort of scenario up there. And, gradually I came to know all of these people, and I came fairly close with every single one of them, and I got to know something about each and every single one of them. And I think at that time, what I had to prove to myself, given all the constant dysfunction I dealt with in the context of my family life, and just all throughout my family life, ever since I was a teenager, and my older brother, started acting out so much. I had to prove to myself that there could be some kind of peace and harmony between people, that there could be some kind of love. And, that's what I set out to do. I set out to be really kind to these people. Um, I cooked. I would often share my food. Um, I was probably the most capable person there and the busiest. And for that reason, I think everybody gravitated towards me and just sort of looked at me as if I was this kind of shining light. And it's just so ironic and funny because, it wouldn't be too long before I would start spiraling downwards pretty severely, given how strange I was for my family and how upset I was at them for letting, these things to continue to transpire when it had been promised, years and years and years prior that my older brother would never be permitted to live with us again. But I was doing my thing and I was trying to get it done as best I could, and trying to be kind and focus on my studies, go to work, and so I was up there for the course of 3 months. I actually ended up missing rent my second month, and I think the third month too, right? So, that there, what ended up happening was I went home at some point, and I had my hours cut at one job. I lost the second one, maybe a month and a half into things, and that really was a big blow for me. It was like, fuck, I'm finally on my own, and this happens. And I didn't really take it as a cue to just keep looking for something else, find something else to replace it. I kind of took it as a cue to start spiraling downwards, and that's basically what happened. And I did start looking for other jobs, eventually. And I remember coming home to my parents' place at one point, and uh, I saw my older brother standing up out front. He was like, "Hey," I'm looking at him like, oh, what the fuck do you want from me now, man? And I'm looking at him and he's like, "Hey, hey, hey, what's the frequency, Kenneth?" I'm like, "What the fuck is this guy on now?" And so he's like, "Hey," I'm like, "What's up, dude? What do you want?" He's like, "Well, I didn't mean to, really make you upset." And okay, you didn't. Cool. Sure. He's like, "Oh yeah, it was the Xylem mainframe, and about EMF, just all this like, very classically paranoid delusions that he started spewing out about, how his thoughts weren't his own and his actions, he couldn't be held responsible for them." And, he just kept going on and on with this shit. And I walked with him down the cul-de-sac of our street, and I'm like, "Okay, okay, okay, all right, okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna go get the work clothes that I came in for, dress shirt and tie. I'm out of here, okay? Like, all right, nice talking to you." And I went and I drove off, and I just cried in my car for like an hour. Like, really, this is what we all get to deal with. This is what I get to deal with. And it's such a sad and stupid thing because you know it's not like he's recovered so much. He's just kind of a lump now. He just sort of sits around, 7 years after the fact. I would go on after that point to complete that sequence of courses. It would take me maybe 2-3 years after that. 30, 30, 33, 34 units of mixed science classes. Some fairly difficult. The general chemistry sequence, which I passed by exam. Um, but just a lot of classes, and I kind of took my time with it. I wasn't in a huge rush, and I wasn't trying to perform super well. It was just, okay, let's just get this license. I know what the bare minimum is. And I'd previously been a very good student in college, and in graduate school, But you know what? I was like, okay, this is for a practical vocational purpose. I'm not, I'm not trying to go on and get a PhD in biotech or something. Let's just get this done. And so I did over the course of 3 or 4 years. What ended up happening is, you know, by the third month I was up there at Somas, so many crazy times. You know, lots of parties and stuff like that went on. Lots of drinking on my part and on everybody else's part. Everybody up there was doing some drug or another. There was there was so much fascinating shit that happened up there. From Troy's brother Lance, this kind of 40-year-old like scumbag who's just like clearly a disturbed individual who had actually cut, slashed Troy's forearm at some point, and the story of that came out. Scared the shit out of me. Another point, I'm hanging out with them, and they got back from some bar they were at, and they got into a knife fight with some locals there, and yeah, some crazy shit, very alarming. And Simine was like, she was literally like in love with me at some point because Troy would constantly emotionally abuse her. And, at one point I just, without even saying anything to him about it, I made it apparent to him that it wouldn't be tolerated. It was a really funny night, she had come to me crying about how, Troy had been stealing her food, yelling at her, whatever it was. And, she walked into the hallway after he called to her, and I just followed right behind him. I was wearing this tight-fitting t-shirt, and I just kind of puffed my chest up. Quiet, just standing there, my head over her shoulder, just looking at Troy like, what's up, dude? What are you gonna do? You gonna harass this woman? Because I will fucking break your face if you do. I just couldn't, it just broke my heart at some point to hear the kind of shit he was doing to her. I just felt the need to protect. But I guess every kind gesture doesn't go unpunished because, Simine would basically at that point, or shortly after, sort of fall in love with me and just, call me and text me all the time. And just like, oh, Jane, what do you want for your birthday? I'm just like, finally, I had to really lay into her and be like, listen, woman, I'm not your boyfriend. I'm not your husband. You're not going to be asking me when I'm leaving and when I'm coming back from this place. You're not going to be trying to get too close to me. This isn't happening. You're like 65. I'm 26. I ain't trying to get, crazy on this thing. It's not gonna happen. She cried, and I was just like, it's okay. I gave her a hug. I said, look, this is just how it is. No big deal. Don't do it anymore. And she, admitted that she had some kind of problem with her psychology, and it was really cute. It was really sweet to hear her sort of confess. And I said, okay, don't worry about it. I'll be around, but just don't push it. That's it. It's not the end of the world. So from that point forward, there were so many crazy, good, fun, gnarly, telling, harrowing times that I had up there. One night in particular, this story is just, this is just such a good story. And I think it reveals something about me that's really important for this project that I'm attempting here. And that's to use this venue here, to get to the bottom of some of my sort of more symptomatic behaviors, my own psychological problems, and to see what we can do about sort of dissolving those knots. I don't know if this is, again, I suspect at some points that this is kind of misguided and this is me just kind of jerking myself off, but let's see what we can do with all this. So yeah, this night, there was a night where it was maybe shortly after, maybe it was the night of my birthday, I don't remember. All the roommates got together, we took a photo. Simine made a cake. We were just a happy band at that point. And, it just felt so good to have this sort of minimal sense of community and to belong to something. where things weren't so bad, you know. Where things were tolerable, and where, I mean, for me, the most important thing was that I was really appreciated and respected and held in high regard, and it was because I improved everyone's quality of life there, because, I was probably the least broken, out of the bunch, and I had a lot to give, and I wasn't afraid to give it. And I love to talk to people, and I love to sit down with them to talk to them about whatever it was that was on their mind. It just, human beings are just fascinating. To hear Tom's stories about his life, to hear Samin's stories. It turns out she was the benefactor. Her benefactor. She used to run a bed and breakfast in Belgium. The benefactor died in a plane crash. And, that's what led to her moving to the States. Tom had all kinds of fascinating stories about his youth and his childhood, and how things turned out the way they did for him. Um, you know, Troy and Tim, also entertaining characters. But anyways, what I really enjoyed about that time was, being able to connect with these people and being able to sort of share space with them, and to share space without having this sense of constant hostility that I'd known for so long, living in my parents' home and growing up there. Sense of fear and hostility, and like we're always on the brink of some kind of tragic, event, some crazy fight or another. So I'm there, in the south of Somas, and maybe it's the night of my birthday. I don't quite remember, but things are fairly happy. And one of the property managers, he invites me to the annex, and he's taking care of his newborn daughter, and he's like, just, the only thing I ask is keep it down. Okay, fine, no problem. When I step inside, the first thing I see is this adorable little redheaded girl, curly hair, beautiful body, very pretty face. She got a little bit of bad side, and I can tell she got the lip ring. I'm like, oh my, where did you come from? And Ricky had been previously talking about how he's gonna have girls over and stuff. I was like, all right, cool, and so, and that's the one of the property managers, and of course, sitting in front of this poor girl, this young girl in her early 20s, is Tim. And he's just like gesticulating madly and wildly. I don't even know what he's doing, but he's failing to impress. He's not just failing to impress her, he is scaring the living shit out of this poor girl. And so I come over, and I'm uncomfortable with the situation. And I look at the two of them, I look at Tim, and I just say, damn, Tim, you're really smooth, aren't you? In a very loud, assertive way. Everybody just busts up laughing. And Tim just stands up, vanquished, and just runs off in shame. I'm like, all right, mission accomplished. And all of a sudden, cute little Miss Redhead, her name was Taylor, she's looking up at me, just with googly eyes, just beaming, like, oh, my hero. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, okay. That was a pretty good end, I guess. So we talk. She asked me these questions. It's my laundry day. I had a tight white t-shirt on. My arms were kind of showing. And she's like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I do this and that. And she's like, oh, you look like a fighter. I'm like, yeah, I train some jiu-jitsu and stuff. And, she's like, oh, yeah, let's step outside. And she starts smoking a cigarette, and she's just looking at me. We're sitting down. She's like, oh, you're a player, aren't you? I'm like, you have no idea. And that's the furthest thing from what I am. This girl had this thought in her head that just because I project this sort of self-confidence, that it just penetrates through the core of me, and that's just not even the case. I'm actually incredibly shy, especially when it comes to women. And I'll get far along with any of them or one of them, and I'll get to a point where I'm about to earn trust, and that's pretty much the time at which I sever the relationship without even realizing quite what I'm doing. And it's just this defensive reaction. This is usually how it goes, unless there's a lot of alcohol involved. And So I'm sitting there with her, and she's telling me she thinks I'm a player. I'm like, no, 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 you got me all wrong. And we banter back and forth, and I'm laughing, just like, oh my god, this girl has no clue, of who I am, and what I'm really like. She finally asks me if she can step inside the house after I told her that I lived there because she needed to use the bathroom. I took her right into my room, and I'm standing there with her, gorgeous little girl, maybe 21, 22. I was 26 at the time. She picks up these photos I have of me having gone on these trips with my friends, fishing trips to Baja, Mexico. She's like looking at them, and who's this? That's my friend Augie. Oh, I have a friend Augie too. Okay, yeah, I know. Whatever excuse, whatever you need to do to feel like you're familiar to me. Okay, and so we start to get close, and we're touching, and I'm just intoxicated, and I'm just scared as shit. It's like, okay, it's time to make a move, and here's what I do. In the blink of an eye, I say some of the most regrettable words in my life. Do you still have to use the bathroom? She was gone. She was done. Stepped out. There's no way I was going to redeem it at that point. And it's like, this girl's just offering herself to me, and I just completely fucked it up because of how low I chronically feel about myself. And this is like this constitutive feature of all of my amorous endeavors. It's just like this thing that I can't seem to shake, where it's like, look, just take it for what it is, do your thing with her, and that's probably all it's going to amount to. Okay, well, why is that so hard to accept? Why is it so hard for me to accept that this person likes me, that she wants me, that she wants to be close to me, she wants to be intimate with me? Shit. This is kind of the story of my life. And so that didn't happen. And, I went on with my time there, just going about my business. Finally, I caught wind of the fact that my older brother had been 5150. I believe it was the first time it ever happened to him. And he'd been taken against his own volition into a mental institution called Hillmont House here in Ventura County, in downtown Ventura. And it's like, okay, the coast is clear. I can come back home and continue with my studies there. And so that's what I did. I moved back home. I knew he was gone. I remember my 27th birthday being there. I remember the way, Samin was like, oh, I feel like light is leaving this place when I left. It's really sweet of you, lady. And, I got home, and, my hours have been slashed at the firm to a bare minimum. I even think that I stopped working there shortly thereafter. I'd lost a job delivering food, and basically I was back in school. I think that next semester I took a marine biology class and a human biology class and maybe one biotech class at night. And I was so unmotivated. I worked a couple bouncing gigs at night. Just getting by on living my folks' place, maybe making 150, 200 bucks a week tops, probably less than that. At some point it was way less than that. And it's funny how you adapt yourself to whatever circumstance you find yourself in. But I wasn't trying to find another job. I wasn't trying to do much besides just sort of hang on and get by at that point. I had those two classes. I had a couple nights a week that I worked, and yeah. So I'm in this this marine biology class, and I'm just going about my business. I made some friends with some of the younger students, some of whom I still keep in touch with and who have gone on to do fairly well. On this field trip to the San Pedro Aquarium, and I'm running my mouth, talking about, my vainglorious life as a bouncer. All of a sudden, this other cute little redhead, with these very distinctive features, really cute little tomboy girl. She just pipes up. She goes, and she's just queuing off of me. She's queuing off of the confidence that I'm projecting. She goes, I like bouncers. She goes, that's a really cool job. And always this adorable, high-pitched, squeaky kind of voice. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, you're like 18 years old and I'm 27. And I'm like, cool. I didn't even say shit to her. And, but she was cute. And I thought about her. We were going home and thinking about her. And I laid down in bed just thinking, man, what a sweet little girl. What a cutie. I wonder what her story is. I wonder what she's all about. I wonder, she was on my mind. So years go by, get through the rest of this coursework and stuff, and pass the patent registration exam finally, start working, prosecuting patents. And this is after I had been hitting my boss up for a while and he wasn't getting back to me, which was really discouraging. We had some kind of a dispute over some money that I owed him. It was really my mistake for not being honest and forthright and handling that the way that I should have. He made a loan to me so I could have a car. Obviously I didn't hold up my end of the bargain, which was to pay him whatever I could on a monthly. I just stopped doing that at some point. So I think that was off-putting for him, given that we'd had previous difficulties of that nature. And so finally, I realized, okay, after I started getting some work with them and I'm enjoying it, and for a while I ran my own training business and stuff, and that sort of petered out. And I thought, okay, well, guess what? It's time to go back to school and to get that science degree. I was thinking I was gonna try and get a science degree in bioengineering or biotech. And so I go back to the college down the street, and by this time, my older brother's back at home. Just it's the same old sort of shenanigans with them. Just only now it's just maybe once or twice a year he'll threaten to fight me or something. It's like, okay, dude, you're still on that thing. Cool, man. Like, everyone else is trying to move forward, and everyone else has just been so stunted by your presence here. And we have been. It's just undeniable. So I'm doing what I can, trying to move forward, kind of coasting, whatever. Okay, time to stop coasting, time to get serious. I signed up for these courses, and that first semester I tried to come back. I dropped them, after getting a 0 on a test or a quiz in this chemistry class. It's just not in the right headspace to be trying to do it. So I slogged through some work at this gym where I was working as a trainer. That kind of petered out at some point when I wasn't making the kind of sales I wanted to be. And I had management come down on me, which is really stupid because I was making every reasonable effort, and it's just kind of like the draw, but they were trying to tell me they needed me to be more committed, and I was probably one of the only trainers who was really making the effort. I rendered many free sessions over the course of the 2-3 months I was there. Got very little recognition for my effort, of all things. And even though I had a decent sort of 10% sales track, it's a tough business at times trying to sell training, and especially in an upscale environment where things are so expensive. But in any case, I ended up back in school. I ended up dropping these classes. I ended up finishing with the gym. I get this surgery on my hip. And I go back to school. And before that, I was sure to set things up to where I would sort of help myself to guarantee my success. Intermediate algebra was the math class I knew I needed to take. Again, it would be the third time I'd be taking it. I had sworn off math in 11th grade of high school. After passing algebra 2, barely squeaking by. And then bio 1 I had to take. Looking back, I didn't have to take bio 1. It was just something that seemed like it would be necessary to move forward. So I wanted to get into associates of science and biology. It was part of the sequence. But the smarter, the more lucrative and sensible route would have been to go engineering. But anyways, so I'm back there in the middle of this whole thing, just kind of like wringing my hands a little bit. Oh, I'm back at the community college. I left this place 15 years ago, and here I am, just feeling super stuck in place. It's gonna be 2 years. No, I'm just in the back of my head. I'm like, I'm still living with my parents. I don't like this. I don't want to be doing this anymore. And I'm sitting there, in this biology class, and 3 weeks in, and I'm thinking to myself, damn, here I am again. And all of a sudden, somebody just slams a stool down next to me, and I turn and I look, and there's this little redhead who's just staring up at me like, hey. And I'm just like, whoa, just taken aback. And guess what? It's the same girl from 6 years prior from the marine biology class. Who'd have thunk? And all of a sudden she's back, and she's in my face, in my lab, and she wants to be my buddy. And I'm like, what the fuck? How did this even happen? This is like something out of a movie or a dream. And we start talking, and it's like she just sucked me completely in. She was so vulnerable and sincere, it seemed, and so insecure about why it was taking her 6 years to get through what should have been a 2-year, deal, before transferring. I'm sitting there just like, okay, this is cool, I get to be close to this person. And she just decided, that this was going to happen, that we were going to be lab partners. And, clearly, she's attracted to me. I find her attractive too. And, she's just this adorable little tomboy. She's 23 now. She's obviously, talking about how, she's had her trials and tragedies. Okay, I get it. You've been chasing boys all throughout college. Okay, all right. Clearly, and I'm just kind of thinking to myself in the back of my head, like, am I going to be your next trial or tragedy? What is going on, young miss? What direction are we headed in? And, so as months go by, I didn't have much of a social life. I was really focused on my studies. I had my work at the firm. I had my one training client that I was training privately, and I was caught up in all this stuff. Just trying to perform well in school. Make enough to be able to sustain my workout habit, and just try and put one foot in front of the other. I didn't have a car, which was tough. I had to borrow my mom's car to get to and from work and stuff. And this girl and I we just hit it off. We became closer and closer. And, every lab, it was just such a joy. It was just something I didn't think about. I look forward to. Okay, I get to spend some time with her again. And eventually I started to look across the classroom at where she was sitting, and every time I saw her eyes would meet mine, and she'd just do this thing, and I'd be like, whoa, like, you were looking at me first, I guess? Like, what is going on with this girl? Like she's just so about me, and just, I think that's how it often is with younger girls and older guys, is, they sort of get this thing in their heads where they imagine that, you know, we know something more than what they do, and it's probably true in most cases. You know, 10 years of life experience can't be discounted, but you know, I guess what she wasn't anticipating is that I had all my own demons and insecurities and difficulties, and that a lot of them centered around what was going on with her, even, you know, with my problems with making myself vulnerable to girls and women. And you know, she made it easy. That was her whole thing. She liked me so much. She just wanted me to take that step towards her. I remember for a while, you know, she would stand at the threshold of the biology lab door, just compose herself and look at me. Bye, James. And she'd bolt. This happened so many times, and every time it was like something would well up inside of me and crash. No, you know, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to play into this. I'm not going to try and get too close to you, was my thinking at first. You know, just let this thing be what it is. Let her pay attention to you. Don't take her too seriously. Don't build it up in your head too much. Just enjoy it while it's here. Don't try and get serious with this girl. She's obviously not that serious about anything. And you're trying now to be serious about your life and to get it into order. And, you know, I think one of the driving forces for her to take things more seriously that semester was actually me. She wanted to impress me. She wanted to be involved with me. She wanted to sort of live up to the sort of standards that I was kind of projecting and putting out there. You know, I knew I had to perform. I knew I had to try hard at that point. It's just too old. And you know, what else am I going to do at this point? You know, it's time to get serious at some point, right? And, you know, the way things would unfold between us, yeah, it became such a fascinating, harrowing, difficult, strange, and scary ordeal. But let's get back to that next time. We're about 48 minutes in here, and I've just been kind of telling the story uninterrupted. I haven't been paying attention to my slips. I haven't been, you know, trying to associate too much around them. I've just been kind of gabbing. But who knows where it's going to go exactly. So when I come back to this next time, we'll try and continue on this thread, and we'll see where it takes us. You know, there's a couple incidents that I have in mind that I think are really crucial, but, you know, part of the point of this whole thing is to not think of things ahead of time, to speak spontaneously. So we'll see to what extent I can achieve that next time, and we'll see if I can sort of incidentally get the stuff out that I want to. And all right, well, thanks again for tuning in. Hopefully that was somewhat interesting or entertaining, and yeah, we'll keep going with it.